好，诸位观众大家好啊！咱们现在又请到了这个咱们灭共的最坚定的好朋友，这个斯波丁将军啊，大家在推特上已经非常了解斯波丁将军，他是坚决灭共的啊，所以今天呢，我们很多观众有很多非常关心的最近的关于 CCP 的话题啊，来一起来跟斯波丁将军来对谈一下。好，
So first, welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for sitting with us. You're a close friend, probably best known figure in the overall whistleblower movement. You have a lot of fans, including myself. I read your book. I love it. It's a lot of fun reading it. So thank you again, and Lude is going to ask some questions.
好的，首先啊，就是关于这个休斯顿大使馆这个事件啊，就是被关停的事件，然后中共的现在这种反应，我想问一下斯波丁将军，您觉得这个事件往后发展会不会更加升级啊
General, we all know that. Do you prefer that I stop? I think you understand, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead, please, General.
So you need to expect to see much more coming. We're in the midst of a Cold War. As Kissinger said, we're in the what would be called the foothills of the Cold War, but nevertheless we're in a Cold War. And this is just one of many events to come. It is not just a one-off. It doesn't mean anything extra other than we're moving deeper and deeper into an area of confrontation and strategic competition.
好的。还有就是这个现在这个香港自治法案已经通过啊，但是为什么川普总统到现在为止还没有任何的这个相应的这个制裁，包括脱钩啊，相应的这种对中共的一些重锤，为什么还没有落下？您是怎么看的？
With regard to all China policy in the United States, there is still an element of disagreement amongst policymakers here in Washington, D.C., some that understand the full nature of the Chinese Communist Party, some that don't, and therefore it creates this slow-moving change. It's not going to come rapidly, and at times that can be very frustrating, particularly with regard to things like the Hong Kong issue. But nevertheless, it will proceed and begin to pick up pace. I think the most important issue that we're dealing with right now is the need for China and the Chinese Communist Party to access Western capital, and Hong Kong is the key way that happens. And it's also very important for Wall Street. It's very important for corporate America to continue to see this perpetuated, because in essence the Chinese Communist Party has incentivized our private sector to go along with them, and they in turn lobby Washington D.C. to continue these policies, to include the administration. And many in the administration hear these pleas from the corporate side and from Wall Street. So we can expect that this will take a very long time to implement, but ever so slowly, methodically, we will change. And I think it will impact at the time of, in some future time when we're not going to know when the actual definitive change comes, but we'll see it. I have faith.
I too.
好的，这个关于华尔街啊，就是前天这个福克斯新闻采访到的华尔街里的桥水基金的 CEO 啊说，将会撤出中共国。你觉得这是不是一个很重要的信号？就是华尔街对现在这个中共啊的中共的这个概念的彻底的放弃啊。华尔街 ，Wall Street。
About Dalio.
桥水基金。
So, Dalio has $5 billion, I believe, from the PBOC in Bridgewater. It's like the previous problem I was speaking about. Many companies are incentivized to essentially go along with the Chinese Communist Party. And in fact, they see in a lot of ways that the Chinese Communist Party has a better model, and they wish to emulate that model. That's because they don't understand the nature of the Chinese Communist Party. They don't understand what it's like to be Chinese living under that system, because they've never had to be Chinese living under that system. Even if they have lived under that system, they were not Chinese living under that system. They were like me, foreigners living under that system, which is a completely different thing. And therefore, and the Chinese Communist Party uses that. They use these people as sometimes the term useful idiot, to basically, as a proxy to tell them this is the Chinese Communist Party is good. They take care of the Chinese people. They don't oppress them. They don't kill them. And in fact, it's because they don't know. And even myself, now this was the way that I saw China when I lived there from 2002 to 2004. I didn't understand the party. I didn't understand the system. I wasn't Chinese. I was a foreigner living in China for 2 years, and still I could not see. The control of the narrative, the control of what foreigners see in the country, the aspect of the Chinese Communist Party that most of them never come into contact with. This is the same thing that I saw, and what many of these people see when they go to China and they listen to these Chinese Communist Party leaders, who are professional liars. They are taught to control the narrative, because political warfare is the way that the Chinese Communist Party wages war. So they are experts at what they do.
Good, well said.
南海就是这次2艘航母啊，战斗群啊，在南海的这种军演，这是一种常规的这种现象呢，还是说是为了准备后面一系列的这个应对对南海的这个中共啊这个军事化岛屿的这种应对，怎么看？
So, the South China Sea is really, it's clearly not the territory of China. It is a territory of the nations, according to international law, that are supposed to have access to those resources within their exclusive economic zone. And in fact, what China has done has been declared illegal under international law. And of course, the Chinese Communist Party has decided not to follow international law. So I think the United States has been very clear at saying, you're breaking the law, you're taking resources like fish, like oil, like energy resources from the nations of the region and their people. So imagine if, and oh, by the way, this is also the history of China, where Chinese resources have been taken, certainly by many nations of the West. Certainly Shanghai was occupied itself by many nations of the West. And the Chinese people understand this, and they think it's wrong that happened. It's called the century of humiliation, according to the Chinese Communist Party. Yet the Chinese Communist Party is essentially doing the same thing that they say that has created a century of humiliation for the Chinese people. So isn't this essentially the century of humiliation for the Philippines? Isn't it the century of humiliation for Vietnam and Malaysia and Indonesia, as the Chinese Communist Party seeks to take things that are rightfully theirs by international law? And of course, this is what America is trying to defend. It's trying to defend the rights of the people of Philippines and Vietnam and Indonesia and Malaysia. Why? Because we believe that it's important that people should have the ability to live free, to have access to their resources, to have democracy and human rights and civil liberties and rule of law and free trade. And this is exactly what the Chinese Communist Party doesn't want.
好的，这个还有啊，就是斯伯丁将军写了一本书，叫做隐形战争啊，是中共有一个桥梁写的叫超限战啊。您的这本书是不是对他的这个朝鲜战的一个这个您觉得是一个回应，还是说这是第一啊？第二就是中共的现在的超限战，在美国现在两党政治这种钟摆效应中， 有没有这个信心啊？如果不发生热战前提下，就是光朝鲜战，有没有信心？你觉得美国和中共这种邪恶的这种方式有没有信心赢得这场朝鲜战？
So, I read that book in 1999 when it came out, and I didn't understand it. And in fact, it wasn't until 2015 when I was in the Pentagon again studying the Chinese Communist Party that I finally understood. In fact, it was so ahead of its time in terms of anticipating the opportunities that globalization and the internet would provide the Chinese Communist Party for dominating the narrative using the digital space and dominating the global economy using its predatory economic system. And there's no way me as a warfighter could have understood that in that context. Only somebody that was in a system that recognized that there is no difference between peacetime and wartime. It's all wartime, and it's always a zero-sum competition between the Chinese Communist Party and everybody else. And so, my book is essentially trying to explain in terms that the average person can understand in America what unrestricted warfare is, what we have to do to stop it, and what Americans have to do to get our system to protect their interests as a people. The two systems are different. In America, we believe that the government should be accountable to the people. In China, the Chinese Communist Party believes that the people are accountable to the party. It's a different system. And so, in order to fix America, first, the American people must know what's going on. They don't understand the Chinese Communist Party. Nobody's ever told them. My book is about telling them and introducing them to Chaoshenjian. My next book, which is going to be coming next year, is going to essentially blend Clausewitz's Western way of thinking about war and Sun Tzu's Eastern way of thinking about war, which is very much part of Mao's idea of people war. In Western conception of warfare, war is politics by other means. In the Chinese Communist Party conception of warfare, and very much this is in Sun Tzu, it's also in the Three Kingdoms period literature, it is politics is war by other means. In other words, it's about the narrative, it's about ideology, it's about political warfare, it's about psychological warfare, it is about undermining your opponent from within. The Chinese Communist Party didn't have the most powerful military. What they did was essentially erode support for the Nationalist Party within China to the point where essentially they were able to kick them off the mainland to Taiwan. This is the essence of political warfare. When you connect that, when you connect political warfare in Mao's vision to the internet and globalization, you go from the Middle Kingdom to the whole world.
然后这个关于朝鲜战这一块，就是现在朝鲜战最重要的，其实就是2017年国会先生说的蓝金黄，然后3F 是吧？就搞坏美国，搞乱美国，搞死美国。现在经过这几年，您觉得现在这个美国的政客里头有多少真正的从中共的这个朝鲜战里意识到，有多少人醒过来还是说全部都已经醒过来了？
I think, we're in the middle. In fact, I talk to interagency people all the time. I talk to our military officers and enlisted people all the time about, how do you understand the way that the Chinese Communist Party wages war? And the fact of the matter is, it's very difficult right now for them to accept this way of warfare. And the good news for America is we have two big oceans and two friendly borders, and this has traditionally protected us. Unfortunately, in the 21st century, with the internet and globalization, the battlefield is everywhere. It is in your homes, it is in your living rooms, it's in your schools, it's in your places of worship, it's everywhere. And in fact, the Chinese Communist Party knows no bounds in terms of being involved there. Thinking like that, even me, as a 27 years in the military, training to be a B-2 pilot, understanding how to conduct warfare, in that sense, I was an expert. But in a sense, I was a novice in understanding how the Chinese Communist Party conducts warfare. And so that process of educating our national security establishment on how to think about the threat that comes from China, because it's not the threat of a bomb coming down on your head, it's the threat of your children basically telling you that they don't think democracy is a good way of living their life. It's a different kind of threat, and it's one that we have never had to experience, because by and large, in the past, when the reason you had an Air Force, an Army, a Marine Corps, a Navy, now a Space Force, was to protect your population from being coerced by a foreign power. But today, that coercion can come right through TikTok, it can come right through WeChat, it can come right through Facebook. It can come, and when you don't even know it, when you don't expect it, as a parent or as the person that's receiving it. So it's a very, very different way of thinking about the world, and it requires you to understand the power that Silicon Valley built into their technology and into their business models. The power of Facebook, Amazon, and Google is the power of Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent. Except in Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent, it doesn't stop on 11/11, Singles Day. It goes beyond that. It also encompasses the political, the ideological, and the social. That is something that we're just not prepared to deal with. And in many ways, in fact, I was just looking at a conversation on Twitter between somebody saying, oh, you know, Marxism in China is different from Antifa Marxism. It doesn't matter. Both of them want to see the destruction of democratic systems. And therein lies the synergy between the two. It is that China, the Chinese Communist Party, wishes to see America destroyed from within. Antifa, BLM, they want to see America destroyed from within. So what happens? They cooperate. They work together. Sometimes directly, most times indirectly, because they have the same goals.
也是好。最后一个问题啊，就是关于您个人现在之前从白宫出来以后，现在有没有计划参选议员啊，或者是2020大选，然后或者是重新回到白宫，有没有这个计划？您个人
？No, not me. Look, I decided after the national security strategy was done, that was my job, was to conceive the counter strategy, to come up, to formulate how we fight this fight, and then to begin to help the American people join the fight. So that's why I asked to leave the military. That's why I retired. I took the fight to the streets. And this is what I do every single day, try to educate and advocate and teach Americans the war that they are in, so that they can elect the proper representatives that understand the war as it is, to actually do the things themselves, because America is very much a grassroots society. It is where the government is accountable to the people. So the people must know the nature of the Chinese Communist Party in order for them to be able to fight. So that's what I do every single day. I try to stay out of all the discussions at the White House, because quite frankly, all of my friends work in the White House, they work in the Pentagon, they work in the State Department. They understand. They are doing their best. My job is to get the American people on their side.
好的 ，Thank you， 谢谢今天，谢谢
Thank you.
斯伯丁将军的。
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.